lot of times in education, what I felt like was happening was it was all about the people in charge and if they felt like teachers were worth paying. In public schools, it's very much like there's a union, whereas in the private sector, it's more about what the school's budget says.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
You know, today's guest kind of reminds me of when I was growing up outside of Philadelphia. One of our neighbors was a school teacher, and this was back when you would actually have summers off June, July, and August.
All three of them.
And she would spend all summer long sitting on the edge of her couch, smoking cigarettes and reading Harlequin romance novels. All summer long. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, go outside and play, have fun, and enjoy yourself. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got older when I learned how little we pay school teachers in this country, and I realized she was probably doing that as much for her mental health as anything else.
Is this the same woman who would drive around the neighborhood with all the kids in the car and the windows rolled up and smoke a cigarette?
Yeah, exactly. Gen X kids were built differently. But today's guest, also a good school teacher, shares with us more contemporary solutions of how we can help teachers both with their mental health as well as their financial health.
Cam Lieberson is a professional educator, having spent their career between public and private school teaching, and is now the education director at a private school. Cam joins us today to share some of the many challenges teachers face with being paid so little, especially in expensive locations such as New York City.
So let's get schooled by Cam. Well, Cam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we'd like to dive into money stories and money discussions on the show. So if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your early career and your financial experiences with that early career of yours.
Mm-hmm. So I started my career actually as an assistant teacher at a private school in Manhattan. That's one of those like really fancy private schools where they charge a lot of tuition, and yet somehow the teachers don't make very much money. So I did that for a few years, and then was encouraged to switch into public school teaching because folks said like that's where all the good benefits and the good pay, which was true and accurate in some ways, but I felt that there was a major trade-off in terms of my like mental health, my physical health. I was a theater teacher, and so I would see multiple classes a day. So I saw almost 800 students.
Yay.
Yeah, and the supervisor that I had at the time wasn't really that excited about arts education, even though she stated she was. So I struggled a lot in that role. And so I went back to teaching in private school, but I felt like there was always kind of a trade-off between like those great benefits and the salary, but the kind of like the cost, the other cost of that. Right. So I taught for a long time, but frankly, didn't realize I really wasn't making a living wage until I did. When I switched from working in one private school kind of network to a new school, and they were a school that felt really strongly about paying teachers. And that was the first time that I felt like I could comfortably do things like make rent, pay all my bills, and then also like kind of enjoy New York City, like not having to skip things because I couldn't afford them. And so a lot of times in education, what I felt like was happening was it was all about the people in charge and if they felt like teachers were worth paying. In public schools, it's very much like there's a union, and the union has, salary steps, and that's what you get paid based on your experience, based on your degrees. Whereas in the private sector, it's more about what the school's budget says. And I'm now in a position where I'm a preschool director. And so I set the salaries for the teachers. And so it was really important to me immediately when I came in. I said there wasn't a salary scale. People were just kind of like getting small raises based on whatever they asked for when they were hired. And there were a lot of salary discrepancies amongst the teachers. And it was very familiar to me from when I was a teacher, because I could tell it was whatever people felt like they were worth, what they felt like they could or couldn't accept when they took the jobs. I think there was a lot of intersectional identity things happening there as well, like which teachers felt emboldened to ask for more money and who didn't. And so, like, knowing that I can walk into a board meeting and say to board members, this is what I think teachers are worth, and here are the reasons why. And then I also realized that meant people weren't doing that for me.
Right.
Do you think, go back to, I'm going back to the first part of your career here. Do you think that income insecurity informed or made it changed your relationship with money?
Yes. Yes and no. I think the first few years before I realized how much I don't think I realized I was struggling. I think I thought that's just what it was like living in New York City. I don't think I understood that it was a career thing. Like that people with the same amount of kind of entry level qualifications were making double what I was making. I don't think I knew. I just thought like being young in New York City is really hard. And I think it took a couple of years for me to realize like, wow, this is panic. I think one thing it really informed also was that I didn't feel capable of saving, which I didn't do until the job that I was talking about, where they had like fought for the private school where they had fought for teachers to make more money. And someone was like, "Oh, how are you doing with your saving? Do you want to enroll in this program where we match your like what you put aside?" And I said,
The heavens
Literally.
departed, the rainbows came out.
Literally,
the light shines through.
yeah.
That's amazing. So how long was it when you started your career until you had that job that you felt like you were being rewarded appropriately?
I taught for 5 years.
With all that stress that you didn't necessarily know that you had. So I'm curious, in hindsight, what do you think the quality of your performance was on the job, having that level of financial insecurity and that stress?
I'm a perfectionist, so it was excellent. I would love to sit here and tell you, like, wow, that really weighed on me. But frankly, I felt like I had to work hard to keep every job I had. Like, I definitely felt like there was no room for messing up. Because also a lot about teaching, people in the education industry are still very like merit based in terms of like who you'll work with the next year. Like they can hold little things kind of over your head. So I never felt like, oh, they're only paying me blank amount. I feel very stressed, anxious about this. And so I only have this much capacity. I think I just put all of my energy into the work. If you asked how I felt about maybe my mental, my physical health outside of work,
that's what I was going to just ask.
That's what suffered. I think my performance at work was stellar. And I think that the other parts of my life were what suffered instead.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the sad part about that is that those who are decision makers don't ever see that side, right? Or very rarely see that
or aren't
side.
Interested.
Yeah. And you're right. You're doing the job.
If I'm doing
and they're
a great
just
job at
right.
work.
They're happy.
I care, right?
Let's just keep things the way they are, right? So they don't. One of the things that John and I have seen anecdotally is that individuals who are oftentimes teachers or in that kind of
service sector role.
Right, that oftentimes it's either a partner or a spouse or a family member that kind of is the support system financially, right? So you maybe have a spouse that's earning twice as much, 3 times as much, so they have the time and energy to dedicate.
Exactly. A lot of my I'm solo. A lot of my teachers at my school have expressed like it's a good thing we're a 2-salary household, because even though like I work really hard to make sure they feel like they're getting compensated, it's still education, and it's still I work, where I work is a nonprofit, so we only have so much, and they're like, well, it's a good thing my husband works full time as well. So no, it's just me, which has been challenging for sure. It would be great also. There was a point in time where I also did some work in the arts ed space where I was like kind of freelance for a year. That was my dream job, but I could not afford it. I actually went into some financial debt that year because I was not getting paid enough to cover just my regular expenses. And so that was the year I actually said to the person I was dating, I was like, well, if we get married, I would like to do this and make this much money because this was my passion. I think in the education space, they also rely on teachers being really passionate. They're always like, it's for the kids. Do it for the kids. Work extra hours for the kids. Don't you love them enough? Yes, we love them.
Right.
Of course we love them.
But you can also be wealthy and love them. Yeah. That's an option.
And also then I'd have so much more joy in my heart and space for when they're having a hard time.
Exactly.
I think I noticed that later in my career, that I think it was more the stress built. so that even when I felt like I was getting paid well for my teaching, I think that I was starting to reach my capacity more quickly, like in the classroom, in terms of like I taught little kids. So like when they would cry or when they would have a tantrum or have conflict, I think that like my my cup was already a little full of
patience was-
stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I decided to leave teaching was because I felt like I couldn't do more than what I was already doing.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts in general on the pay scale for teachers? I mean, are we doing a disservice to teachers and then consequently students by not paying teachers more equitably?
Yeah, like for example, when I was looking for jobs, let's say like 5 years ago, and I had 6 years of experience and a master's degree, folks were wanting to pay me like $65,000. Which for having paid for a master's degree,
Right.
And in Manhattan,
Yes.
right? I mean, $65,000 in Central Ohio is very different than in Manhattan.
yeah, that
right?
doesn't. It's not. Again, it's not really like the cost of living in New York. It's not really a living wage.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I forget what the question was.
Just what your thoughts are on the fairness of teachers' pay and whether or not it affects their quality of their job.
Oh, absolutely. I think also, especially when I was working in public schools, when teachers are protected by a union, there's very much, I come at 8:20 because that's when I'm paid to arrive. I teach. I take my break at the exact minute it begins. And when I'm not seeing that is that in the private schools where teachers don't have that protection. I think teachers have a desire to protect themselves. Say, I deserve time off.
Right.
I deserve a break during school. And I think because there's no protection there, I think that teachers, when there isn't protection there, teachers struggle.
Yeah.
And they're always kind of looking for the school that will make them feel like they have like the ability to take a break or get paid or both, which would be
Right.
So at any point in time, did you have family that you could lean on for all of this?
I did around when I graduated from college. I had help if I needed it, but it was very much like your salary pays for your apartment. It pays for the things you want to do. There was like, when I was like 22, 23, there was a safety net, but the expectation was like, you're out in the world, like you're making a salary, like we got you through college. It's time to go live your life. But I think I didn't understand that I probably needed help.
Yeah.
Because again, I thought I was just like young in New York City and like we pinch pennies.
Yeah. Right.
It's just the culture here, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome point, Cam. We really appreciate that. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Living Not So Fabulously. We have more of our interview with Cam here for you. You've gone from the private sector of teaching where it sounds like you didn't have that great benefits to the other side where you did have some benefits and now you're a director.
Yes.
How has your financial life changed and what tools maybe do you have available now to you to grow your financial security that you didn't necessarily have when you started out your career?
One main one is knowledge. I didn't know like what I should be saving, how I should be saving, what I should be asking for from my employer in terms of benefits. Because I changed jobs a few times, I also understood things like health insurance and what all of the acronyms stand for, what coinsurance is, how to submit claims. Like there was just a lot of knowledge that I wish someone had taught me. We could talk another time about why high schools don't teach that or colleges. But that was really a big one, was like knowing why I should be saving or also why I shouldn't spend every single penny I make.
Right.
Like it's, like that was sort of how I felt when I first was making a paycheck was, this is my money.
Yeah.
Right.
Do what I want, right?
Yikes. I was like, wow, adult money. It's not Monopoly money anymore. Like, look, it's a paycheck in my bank account. That's fun. Let's spend it. So I wish I had known that. There was a lot was just, I wish I had known was the biggest thing. I feel like I lacked knowledge.
So what tools do you have available to you now? Is it through teaching, it's typically a 403B that you have for a retirement plan?
So through public school, I actually have a pension
you do?
that will grow, but I'm not working there anymore. So
Right.
it's just like with what's in there, but they were like, keep it in there. It'll
Right.
grow. And then, I had a 403B through one of the private schools where I worked. And now I just have like a Roth IRA because my current like where I work now does not do any retirement anything,
Yeah.
which I have complained about.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it is unfortunate. It's one of the things we have seen, especially for folks in the LGBT community, that we have. Many of us work in jobs where we don't have access to an employer-sponsored plan, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that many of us work in service sectors or in care facilities,
Nonprofits.
right? And all
Nonprofit
these,
building.
and they're oftentimes just not large enough organizations or profitable enough
Exactly.
organizations to actually provide those, which is really hurting our financial futures.
Correct,
Right? We don't have, like you said, you didn't know that you should be saving for the future, and sometimes you know, but you can't, and because of the barriers that are put in place by your employer. So.
Exactly.
If and when you do job hop, what is your strategy then to maybe make up for the lost time you're experiencing now?
First of all, now I know when I'm interviewing what questions to ask. That was also something I did not know, like what I should ask specifically
Like
about
two or
benefits.
three questions. What two or three questions would you advise people to always ask in an interview like that?
I mean, one would be around when I'm contributing to retirement, do they match? And after how long at the school or at the organization? So like I've worked at schools where they said like after 2 years, we'll match, and what percent? That would be like the number one thing I would want to ask. And then also about kind of separately in terms of their benefits, about out-of-network benefits, so I can keep going to therapy, which has like deeply improved my life. So it would be very important to me that it would be at least partially covered.
Right.
Those would be the two things that I would want to know, because also that's financial too for them to cover some of my therapy sessions.
Right.
I'm not stopping. So.
You bring up a really good point that there are general benefits that we can be informed about, but there's also the personal benefits, that which ones am I going to tap into? Which ones do I absolutely need for my physical health and my mental health? Which ones are most important to me? So when you're thinking about that, you're going through that interview process, you have to maybe write those questions down.
Exactly.
This is what's important to me. And then you kind of have a scorecard, right? Of, okay, I can check off that I have this, or I get this and I get this, but I don't get this, but this is more of a pro and this is less of a con, so I'm going to go with this one. I'm glad that they have that, and you can say yes or no.
Yes. And also something I would ask would be around salary, in terms of a lot of places just say every year you get a cost of living raise. I would like to know what they consider a cost of living raise, because some places consider that a 3% raise, and I don't feel like that always reflects.
No.
I mean, like if I got a 3% raise, that would simply cover maybe my like apartment rent going up,
Yeah.
because rent goes up that much. But so does the cost of all living.
Right.
So that would be something I would want to know too, like what they consider a cost of living raise, if that's what they do annually.
Yeah.
Especially when you have years like we had in 2013, where we had 9% inflation, right?
Right.
And
people were still getting 3%.
and you're like, well, I just went backwards 6% if I got a 3% raise.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. So those are some things I would probably want to know. And in general, I'm probably looking to move somewhere that's a bigger organization, because they tend to have more resources. Also, if I ever wanted to move out of the city, I would want a relocation fee, because moving is very expensive. I would want to go somewhere where I'm valued to the point where they're like, what do you need for this to be the right fit for you? Instead of the other way. Instead of it being like, this is the position, take it or leave it.
Right.
I would want it to be like, your set of skills is so phenomenal that we want to make sure this is what you want. What do you need us to say?
Yeah.
That's the dream.
Yeah. So how do you feel about the trajectory of your financial security today?
I feel fine.
Yeah.
I don't feel great. I mean, I, for the most part, paid off any debt that I accumulated, especially during the time when I was doing the theater teaching thing. I also just started working as a consultant, so I'm making some extra money outside of my regular salary. I think if I can keep doing that, I would feel good. What's unfortunate is all of my years in education, I've pretty much always had two jobs, like my full-time job, and then I was tutoring, I was babysitting, now I'm consulting, and I'm like, oh, now I feel comfortable. Like, I'd like to go on vacation. So I got a consulting job so I could go on vacation.
Nice.
So I feel fine. I'm not in a danger zone anymore. I would like to find out if I should be saving more, to like, kind of get that knowledge of like, okay, is this enough each month of like what I'm saving, or is there something I should be doing to do more? Yeah.
I'll say this. At some point in time, you're gonna say it never feels like it's enough,
Yeah.
right? Especially the way that the inflation has gone and the cost of things, especially the older we get, how more expensive healthcare is, all of that kind of planning. And it kind of feels defeatist to say, is it going to ever be enough? Yeah. And no, but yeah.
One of the things that someone always says is like, you should start saving when you get your first job. And I didn't do that because I couldn't. Like I couldn't have paid my rent and done all of those things if I had also been saving at the level that I'm saving now. But like, of course, I'm like, oh, I wish I had saved. So
Right.
So in closing, then I'm curious, what's a more pragmatic recommendation to somebody who's just got out of college and they're going to start their career? Obviously, maybe just saving what you can isn't the advice to take, right? Because you're still struggling. What's the pragmatic recommendation you would give to a younger version of yourself?
So for someone entering education, I would say they probably should check out public school, teaching somewhere where there's a union and there's protection of what your salary is. I also think they should talk to other folks in the industry because I think teachers also don't know what to ask for. A lot of teachers are like lovely people who are also people pleasers and want to do really well and want to please whoever they're working for. And I think they can be nervous or afraid to ask for things. So I think know what you're worth. I think public school, they're going to tell you because there's a salary scale, but also doing that research and finding out like what you're worth to public schools, and then maybe bringing that into interviews and saying, wow, if I were working in a public school, I'd be making 65 and here I'm making 49. Like that's something I wish I had known that I could say in a job interview.
Yeah.
I thought I kind of just had to take what I was given.
Right. Yeah. Do teachers, are they pretty comfortable in sharing their salaries with their peers?
Not more than anyone else is. I feel like, I mean, my teachers all know because we have a salary scale, which is on purpose so that people can like share more openly. Right, exactly. But I didn't know what anyone was making at my first 3 jobs. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us some perspective on what it's like to be a teacher, especially in an expensive city. I think it's a context that we should all have, whether we're going to be teachers or we're going to have our children be educated by teachers.
Yeah.
They're the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You know, I wasn't surprised hearing from Cam that they struggled with some challenges, especially during the leaner parts of their career when they were being paid a little bit less. You know, we've worked with people in different income brackets and we sort of understand that. But what really struck me as surprising was that very often public school teachers are paid more than private school teachers.
I would have thought the opposite.
I always thought it was the other way around. We need to do better to teach for teachers, pay them better in this country than we are.
We certainly do. I think that if you are a teacher, there are some specific tips that Cam shared that we definitely want to reinforce. The first one is budget, right? The more you know about what is coming in, when it's coming in, how it's going out, when it's going out, the better off you are when it comes to your finances. The second thing was that list of benefits that you get from your employer or your prospective employer. Do that cost-benefit analysis and really focus in on what benefits match up with your personal needs. And does that really give you the value that you need? And then the third one is to do that honest gut check about how you feel about your job and how it will affect your life, not just while you're at work, but also outside of work. And not just the finances, but also the mental health aspect of your life.
Yeah, it really struck me when Cam said that you can be on at your job 100% every single day and performing great, but you don't suffer the consequences of the stress of your job until you're at home when you're supposed to be resting. So think of the entire 360 holistic experience.
100%.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Living Not So Fabulously. Remember, you can catch us every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time at yahoofinance.com, your favorite podcast player, and YouTube. Don't forget to check all the bells and whistles, like, subscribe, and save. And until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.